Wait, we're recording, but we don't have Hunter. We need Hunter. We need him. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ska version. Welcome to the Scotch Money Show with your friends Dimitri and Brian and Hunter, talking about the things you gotta know. And I bet you wanted to know about negotiating, baby. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pick it up, 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 pick it up. Oh, that's Scotch Money Show. Yeah, 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 yeah.
There we are.
Hunter's here. Oh yeah, Hunter's here. Yeah, so I'm gonna start singing the song. All right, let's jump into this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ska version. Welcome to the Scotch Money Show with your friends Dimitri and Brian and Hunter, talking about the things you want to know. And I bet you wanted to know about networking. Oh yeah, we're gonna tell you about it on the Scotch Money Show. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. On the Scotch Money Show.
Take two.
Are we spelling Scotch now with an S-K-A?
Scotch. Hey, the Scotch Money. From Boston. Well, hello, everybody.
What's going on?
Okay. Hold on. Let me just situate myself. I'm going to situate. We're not talking about networking. That was a blooper. We're talking about negotiations. Welcome to the Scotch Money Show, where we drink scotch and talk about money and drink scotch and invest in scotch and money. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, let's talk about the whiskey for today. I haven't been drinking scotch. This one is a Star Ward.
Ooh,
and it's an Australian whiskey that's been aged in red wine barrels.
Ooh.
So I gave this a try a week ago and I forgot what it tastes like. So I'm going to give it another try.
You tell us. You tell us. Tell us what you feel.
It's a bit more red wine forward than scotch. It's like, it's as if you got red wine and then dribbled some scotch into it. Some whiskey into it. Oh, I'm not hearing you, Hunter.
Oh yeah, Hunter, we can't hear you.
I was hoping it was kind of like you dropped a couple of drops of wine in a scotch.
It almost feels, it looks like that because of its color.
Yeah.
But it tastes like the other way around.
It's like if scotch and red wine had a baby, squine. Or would it be watch? Okay. All right.
Watch is taken.
Watch.
Watch is sick.
Squine. Right, well, enjoy the squine. I'll enjoy the squine. I hope you guys like my big, it's a Christmas cup. It's Christmas in June.
Christmas in June.
Christmas in June. Christmas only comes 10 times a year. Okay. So I'm sure everybody who's watching visually, and even those who aren't watching visually but watching auditorily, are hearing that I'm wearing a much fancier outfit than I normally wear. With your ears. You're seeing me with your ears. Also, I'm sporting an unshaven look which I promise you is on purpose. In any case, no, the reason for it is not this, but I'm going to say this right now. It's because we're talking about negotiations, and negotiations are important. And it's a very serious, non-joking matter. So we are going to be talking about the different ways that we negotiate. I have a lot of there's a lot that comes to mind for me personally when I think about negotiations, because I've done a lot of them and I've messed up a lot of them, especially early on. Like when I was younger and I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But I do remember, just to kind of start this off, I remember when I was maybe 19 or 20 years old, there was this course, and this was like in the beginning of the internet's, like putting out all that free course material, which now is super prevalent. And there was this professor from Michigan. I think he was like an MIT professor, actually. And he did a course on negotiations. And I thought it was like the coolest thing. And I thought that I was about to learn like everything that there is to know about negotiations. And it turns out that his negotiating style and mine are totally different. But I had no idea back then. So I hope that we're not rehearsed, of course. The things that we talk about here, the three of us have completely different personalities. And so our negotiating styles are inherently different. So let's start it off. Hunter, do you want to talk about your thoughts on negotiation, maybe a little bit of your own style, and let's kick this thing off. Kick it up a notch. Bam. Lost it. Also, we can't hear you.
Well, when I go into a negotiation, typically I look at it from a standpoint of, there's a price I want it at, or whatever, the stipulations, caveat, whatever. There's things I want, and there's things they want. And my goal is to end up closer to what I want than what they want. And any negotiation I come out of where I'm closer to what I wanted than what they wanted, I consider a successful negotiation. So I try to do a little backwards math. If it's a numbers game and it's all about evaluation of a property or something, I do a numbers game. I look at, well, if I come in at this number, which is what I would like to pay, is, closer, let's say, here's the price, here's what I would like to pay. I'm going to start negotiating down here so that where I would like to finish is about the middle. But I'm going to do it in a way where I'm slightly off-centered. So, for instance, if somebody wants, like 200, I'm not going to start at like 100. That's insulting. But if I want it for 165, I'll start at like 145, because that's going to make him come down to like, well, I'll do 185. And then I'll just come up not as much as him. I'll come up to 150. Or 155 at that point, so that then it's on them to come down again. And now they're coming down to like, well, if you're going to go 10, I'll do 10. Now you're at 175. Well, then I bump up to 160 and only go 5 now. And they're like, well, shit, now I'll only go 5. Great, you're at my 165. Thanks for doing business. So I basically reverse math the psychology of it to get where I want to go. And I have not had a negotiation yet where I haven't ended up closer to my side than the middle from the starting price,
All right. I do similar things as well. There are other tactics that I try to incorporate besides just the pricing.
Yeah. It
yeah.
feels a bit single dimensional when it's just on price.
Yeah. But everybody always cares about price.
Yeah. But it's also the easiest thing to negotiate around. And it's the easiest place to get stuck, because when you're focusing on price, then for you to win, somebody has to lose.
Yeah.
The way I think about negotiating is, well, first I would focus on what they believe, what their emotions are, what makes them emotional. I'm a very I like being incremental in life. So I like being very incremental in negotiations. So I take things slow, very unlike Dimitri, who's like, bam, I've got this. And I'm like, let's do it this much first. And then when they agree to that much, it's like, oh, okay, let's just expand the conversation a bit more. So it's an ongoing conversation with me for negotiating. If we're to go on the, like we were talking about products a while ago, so let's just, talk about pricing and products again. And so there was we were negotiating with Restoration Hardware because we have this Churchill leather chair with, studs. Dimitri knows the chair. He was sitting on it. But he also
The
saw
one that
that
ripped?
it was, yeah, the one that ripped. It ripped one day. But one of the things we noticed was that there was like a piece of leather hanging from underneath, and we weren't sure what was the case. So we reached out to Restoration Hardware. Our specific goal, and that's another thing. What's your goal? What do you want out of the negotiation? Our specific goal was either to find a way to repair it or find a way to replace it, a discount on a new chair or whatnot. But what we found, well, we asked about it and they gave us a bunch of ideas for repair, none of which would have worked for us because of the size of the rip. And they were adamant that they can't replace this chair because they're no longer making this. It's not in their product line anymore. But one of the things that they had mentioned during the time, one of the things that they completely ignored was my question about the tag underneath. Why does it look as if this tear had been repaired before, like as if it was a smaller tear that became bigger? Like, why is there a piece of leather underneath that looks as if it was a repair piece? And since they kept repairing that question, I was like, we had to call them on, I had to call them on their bad behavior. It's like, hey, we asked this question and we want to be honored by, you answering this question. There's nothing, there's where loyal customers, we have a history. You've done a lot of good things for us, and we have an expectation on the quality of your work. We have a lot of your stuff. We have a lot of your couches and a lot of your chandeliers.
So many chandeliers.
We have a lot of your chandeliers. We expect that, like a level of service, and for you to ignore, a simple question, it doesn't seem to become what you are, and what expectations are from you. And we weren't expecting much from this. We just wanted them to answer that question. But what I found was that when you call bad behavior, and when you call them on, things that don't really ring true to what their own perceived character of themselves are, even as a company, yeah, they have a lot of people, but they have their own perceived character. They're all about quality. They're all about service. So I threw that out there, and their response was, okay, we're going to replace your chair. We're going to make a new one from scratch.
Of the same type?
Of the same type. And we're going to pick yours up and replace it for free. And I was like, whoa, that's cool.
Yeah, are they a sponsor of ours? Apparently, they're handing chairs out.
And it's like a $2,000 chair.
Holy
so it's not a small deal for them to make one from scratch, which would have cost more to replace the ripped one that we have.
Well, that's really nice of them to do that. That's it's good really customer nice service.
It's kudos to them. But we wouldn't have gotten to that point if we didn't continue the conversation, from a small question to incrementally larger ideas for potential solution, keeping the goal in mind, and just calling them on one piece of bad behavior. Because the moment that somebody misbehaves is your win in negotiation. Like if they act in such a way that's not true to their character or their beliefs, and you bring it up, they'd be like, oh yeah, huh?
Yeah.
Well, let's see how we could get back to how we perceive ourselves.
I think that's interesting because before I talk about my crazy style, like Gangnam style of negotiating. Um, Gangnam style. Don't make that into a meme. Just, oh no, but I'm of the belief that like there are different people with whom you can negotiate in different ways, right? So some people care about their reputation, and so when you hit their reputation by saying, look, you did something that's against your perceived character, like what you're saying, yeah, the first thing they're going to do is say, well, no, that's not true. Let me fix it to show you. And that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that speaks very highly of the company.
Yep.
There are some people that they just don't give a crap. What they care about is the bottom line, which leads back to price on what Hunter was saying. There are a lot of different ways to leverage. The first and most important, I'll give my 2 cents on negotiation, and there's so much, and I keep learning. I personally learn. Negotiations is one of the most important topics that you could even imagine, because you make money on the buy. Everybody knows that, or everyone should know that. You don't make money selling something. You make money buying something, because then you're going to sell it for more, right? That's the goal when you're talking about investing.
Yeah, if you buy too high, you've already lost.
Exactly. If you buy too high, you've already lost no matter what, or you'll have to wait too long.
Mm-hmm.
There are different terms that people care about, and I think terms and price is something. If you go and watch some negotiations course or whatever, like what I did when I was 19 or 20 or whatever, they're going to talk about terms. They're going to talk about price. And if you're not giving on price, then you're taking on term, right? Yeah, like you're giving on one, you're taking on another, and you're trying to find a happy balance between the two. So I'll give an example of that without naming too much. So I negotiated on a property. I negotiated it down by several million, by about 2 million. So the total price ended up being, roughly 5. It was about 7. I got it down to roughly 5. And the way that I did that was the guy really wanted to, he wanted a quicker close. So he wanted speed and stability. And although there were offers much higher than mine, because of the reputation of our company, because we had recently purchased property in that area to show that we're stable, and then on top of that, because of just my understanding of what he needed, because through a conversation and asking questions, I quickly determined that he himself has investors. I determined that although I don't know exactly how much he's paying monthly on a loan, I know that he has a loan, and I know that he's bleeding monthly. So I understand that time is important to him. Price, not so much, because he already is going to make a profit at significantly lower than even where we ended up. So it turns to be a matter of, okay, if I can show you that we're stable and that we're going to do this, and there's no question in your mind, then I'm going to be able to save myself several $1 million, which means that I'm buying right, which means that I can sell later and make more of a spread. That's the way it works. But it also, one of the things that I don't hear a lot of people talk about is, so I have a friend and he never does anything himself. As in, when he walks into a room, he's not going to be coming into your face and starting to negotiate with you and do all that aggressive stuff. But he's a fantastic negotiator, and he makes a lot of money on the buy side. And the way that he does it is he uses proxies. So he knows in his mind what needs to get done. He strategizes like a general, and then he gets lieutenants to go out and do the things. So in this example that I'm talking about, I actually did a similar strategy where I had one of our attorneys go out and contact this seller, communicate with them, Then there was a tour of the property, which you guys know about. I think you guys know what property I'm talking about. Shh, don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody. Then before I even spoke before we were talking about the business of it, there was already vestment, right? We had vested our time. Then we had, I mean, it wasn't the only thing they were doing there, but we showed commitment. We showed ability to perform. We, as a company, have stability. And so the guy felt very safe talking to me, and we negotiated it down by like $2 million. It's ridiculous. When in all reality, the initial price would have worked very well either way for us, for the need. So negotiation is about finesse, and it's about understanding the specific circumstance, right?
Yeah. Because in that specific case, you were essentially trading things that were important to you versus things that are important to him. In this case, it was the intangibles of speed and stability versus the actual price. So it wasn't a one-dimensional negotiation where one had to lose and the other had to win. It's not as if it's win-win, but you found ways to negotiate things that were unequal to the both of you. I mean, we don't care if we we have speed isn't so important to us. We can do speed, but like price would be great.
Exactly.
And it's the opposite for him. So it's people like to call it win-win, and it kind of is, but it's not win-win on the same dimension.
Yeah, it's different dimensional. It's interdimension, intergalactic, planetary, intergalactic.
Yeah, ideally, when you have two different sets of values like that, you're basically trying to play what you value less, what they value more. So I mean, ideally in a negotiation, if you can identify something that's of high value to someone that's of low value to you, that's a good power move. Like you can offer up these things that to you don't really mean anything, but to them is a big deal. Then you're definitely going to come out on the winning side of the negotiation.
But so, and I 100% agree with that sentiment. My question is, and I guess maybe it's not even so much of a question, it's more of just a thought. In my experience, anytime that the values are the same, as in when you care about price and you don't care about terms, and they care about price and they don't care about terms, for example, or vice versa, no one cares about price, but it's all about the terms. That's when deals don't get done. Because,
or they get done, but then people are unhappy.
Yeah, both sides are unhappy. Both sides leave feeling like, you know what, I overpaid, or I didn't get what I wanted, and then the other side's like, well, I didn't get enough, and everybody is unhappy in those types of circumstances. And I feel like those types of circumstances stem from people get very caught up in what they're doing. And although sometimes, look, you got to do what you got to do, and sometimes those situations that are unavoidable, c'est la vie, is what the French say. But a lot of times, I'm a firm believer of this. If a deal's not working, it's not working.
Yeah, just don't try to. Deal.
Yeah, just don't do the deal. Like nobody's forcing you to do it, but people get very caught up in doing deals like that because they feel like, well, I've already invested so much time and I should be doing this, and it's the deal that I said to myself I would do. Sometimes you got to step back and say, why am I doing this?
Yeah, it's important to know what your goals are.
You should.
Coming into it, what are your values? What are your standards?
Mm-hmm.
What won't you breach? And I think it's a very introspective process. It depends per person and per negotiator.
Yeah.
And if you're not very clear with that, then you or both parties are just going to be unhappy, especially if you're trading equally valued items on the same dimension.
It's important to go into anything, and it's funny because I feel like every Scotch Money episode we at some point talk about this where we're saying it's important for us to, you got to go into everything with a plan. Like, you don't start a negotiation willy-nilly, guns a-blazing. You don't do it. You go into negotiation understanding, here's my low, here's my high, here's the terms that I need, and here's what I can give on.
Yeah, because
And there, yeah.
Yeah, because then you'd have the bandwidth, right? If you have, here's my goals, here's what my boundaries are, then it gives you the ability to think about the other person and to listen to the other person and understand their values. And then you can get creative about what else you can negotiate on that isn't, that isn't on the playing field.
Exactly.
Like terms or speed or stability or reputation.
And a lot of people go into negotiations not thinking about their own terms or their own stuff. Like, a lot of people go into it with an idea of, I generally want to, if I'm selling a piece of real estate, they think I generally want X amount of money, but they don't really think about the terms, but they know that in their mind, in their head, subconsciously, or in the deep recesses of the mind, they know the terms that they must achieve. Because what if I said to you, like, Hunter, it doesn't matter what the value of your house is. What if I said to you, I'm going to give you $10 million for your house? Sounds good, right? I'm going to give that to you over the next 1,000 years. Still sound good? Or better yet, I'm going to give it to you in 1,000 years. My descendants will give it to your descendants.
Full lump sum payment, millennium from now.
Yeah, if you have descendants that exist at that time, then they will get $10 million in 1,000 years. It's crap. I mean, it's
nothing. Hardly.
Exactly.
Buy a pack of gum.
Exactly. If the world still exists and you have descendants and this and this and that, I mean, obviously, I'm speaking in hyperbole, but you understand. Everybody understands the point that I'm making. The terms are actually extremely important. And okay, you don't have to even look at it in 1,000 years. If we're talking closer on price to what you actually want, or to what I actually want, but now we're talking about difference in 6 months. Well, 6 months is a long time, or 1 year is a long time. What if I say, Hunter, I love your land. Your house I don't really need, because I intend to, as you know, get a high density multifamily put onto there. And you're like, that's cool, whatever. I just want to sell my property. And I say, well, in order for me to buy it and feel comfortable myself, I need to have this period of time of X amount of months to be able to get entitlements, permits. I need to go and talk to the city, the county, make sure everything's fine. Because if I buy your property and I can't get that high density that I want, well, you've made your money, but now I'm screwed, right? And you're going to say, of course, I understand that. And so now we're talking terms. The price is important. And if we can get to the right terms, then, okay, all we have to negotiate now is price, right? But what if my terms are, well, I need a year. And you say, well, I can't wait a year. That's a long time. Or I don't want to wait a year. Or if I do wait a year, then I want you to pay me more. And I want you to have a hard deposit within 30 days or something, like, there's so many things. And then I'll say, no, screw you. I'm not going to do it in 30 days. I'll do it in 90 days after engineering comes in. And then you're like, no. It doesn't take 90 days to do engineering. And then I'm like, whoa. We're going to do a phase 2 because you had a chemical spill. We're now talking about, and then you can put contingencies in where you say, okay, we'll release X amount of money to escrow after 90 days, but we have a contingency that it won't be released to you until permitting goes through. And so, you release the term contingencies throughout a period of time. And that's what a good lawyer will help with. But you, as the general, have to lead that lieutenant to do the right job. And it requires strategic thinking. And negotiation is all about that. It's about the plan.
Yep. And movement on terms can be a great substitute for movement on price.
Absolutely.
I use that a lot, in a negotiation. It's like, okay, here's my turn to come up. I don't want to come up, but how about I'll offer to let him have this thing he wanted instead of coming up. And then he'll end up coming down as a result because he gets that thing he wants. And for me to come up again, I'm going to come up this time, but I'm going to take that thing away again. You know, so it's like it becomes this extra added kind of bonus tool when there's terms outside of just price. I like as many of those as possible because it allows me the most flexibility and maneuverability within the negotiation.
Yeah. And sometimes terms are unbendable. So, I mean, every negotiation, let's say this hand represents price, this hand represents terms. You have your sliding scale, and at some point on price, you're going to hit their bottom. I can't go lower than this because I'll be, losing money, or I won't be making the money I need. But terms also has that sliding scale. There was a particular negotiation that was a rough one. And it wasn't a negotiation of choice. It was a negotiation of necessity, which is also different. Sometimes you negotiate because you want something. Sometimes you negotiate because you need something, which those are two different positions. You always want the other side to think that you want something, but you might need that. And the power position, the power dynamic between you and the other side is extremely important. Before I talk about this, well, here, I'll say a piece of the example. So there was a price being negotiated for a particular buyout there was a civil dispute buyout that I was negotiating for a group for. And although I was the decision maker at the end, it wasn't just me I wasn't the only one negotiating. There's about 25 people and several lawyers and myself and the other side. It was a shit show. Sorry for the cursing. So you're wrangling cats over here, and then these people are doing lots of moving parts, very dynamic negotiation. And then one of the back and forth discussions was, okay, we'll walk away. So the price is now 0 if you give us the names and addresses and personal information of all of those 25 people. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous because you guys are thugs and you can go yourselves. The point is, sometimes you're like, well, would I love to pay 0 for something that I want? Yeah. Wait a minute. The terms are completely unacceptable. Can't do it. And honestly, in that particular one, and this is kind of a unique circumstance, it would have made my personal life a hell of a lot easier to say, oh yeah, sure, go for it. I don't care. But couldn't do it. That's it to me, per the rules in which I engage in when I do business, or go into a negotiation. I set that as it was off the table. It wasn't a negotiable term, but they wanted it to be. And so that it ended up eventually, but many months later, like 5 months later, getting negotiated out. And obviously that term was not in there, but sometimes price doesn't mean anything. Sometimes it's all about the terms, right? Hunter, you are muted.
How do you guys feel about best and final, like the use of best and final?
It's never best and final.
Best and final is like a story. It's a way to coerce people.
Right? That's why like when somebody comes at me with best and final, I kind of like get a little perturbed. Like I'm like, how dare you? Like it's just like it puts me off. But I've never had the, I guess, balls, for lack of a better word. I've never had the gumption to use best and final on a buy side, because I'm like, well, if it's a little bit more, maybe, like, it's just like, I just don't want to draw a line in the sand, and past that we're fighting or parting ways. It's just like,
because you're creating a bit of tension if you say best and final, and there are people who can do that. And like, there are some places where that's acceptable and that works, because there are some people who like playing that game, and
sometimes you have to create tension.
Yeah, and then the people who like playing that game, they would go, oh, they hear best and final, and they go, oh, that's nice. They'd feel an exhilaration for it.
We're getting close.
So, they get an emotional benefit from paying the best and final price. But different people are different, and in my case, I wouldn't be comfortable with that. It's like, wait, you're not allowing me to have a conversation. And it depends on what it is, because if it's something irrelevant and they say best in finals, like, why not, right? But
psychological tools are important.
Yeah, they are important, and they do create tension, because it creates a sense of scarcity. It's like, oh, I'm not going to be able to get this at this price tomorrow, maybe.
Yeah, it's done.
And there's that unknown, and then that's the game. And then that's the game that you're playing, as a consumer as well. It's like, oh, this is really interesting. This is really exciting, because it's best and final. And if you want to play the game at that time, then you'll play it at that time. And if you don't want to play the game at that time, or the price isn't right anyway, or you feel disrespected somehow because of the positioning, then you just won't play in that sense. But it's like in a first world country like this, negotiations are play. It's not like a life or death situation.
Sometimes it can be, and it depends on, I guess, how far down the rabbit hole of life and death do you want to discuss. But sometimes, so I like to use best and I'm very transparent with my negotiations. Like, and it's funny, Brian, you're just boom in there. It's true. I am very I do the shock and awe approach. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. It doesn't mean anything to me. I can walk away from this negotiation right now and not care at all. I'll keep living my life. So we're starting because I want this. I want this for this reason. I'm willing to pay for it. But there are terms that need to be set up, and you better not change those terms on me. Once we've signed, look, we're going to go back and forth, and we're going to tear each other new ones. And there are going to be times where I'm going to be like, no, absolutely not. That's impossible. And then I'll say, well, it may be a little possible. Or that's the best and final. But, I guess we can talk about it a little bit more. Sometimes, a little bit, but it depends on the circumstance. But there's always an understanding of, I'm not just having this negotiation. I'm doing more negotiations like this. So if I'm talking about a property, let's say I'm talking about an industrial property, which is what we've been buying recently. Hashtag Vosh Capital. Hashtag we're awesome. So let's say I'm negotiating on an industrial property. Well, do you think I'm negotiating on one? No, I'm negotiating on many. And is your property going to be the next one that we buy? Maybe, if we can get to the right terms. And I'm not going to bullshit you. I'm a busy man. I got scotch to drink. I got money to make. There's events to go to. I don't have time to negotiate for a long time. When I'm talking about something, I'm going to say, here's what it is. Here's what I need. We can go back and forth, and that's fine, because you got to play the game. The game is the game. But we're not going to do this for months. This is what it is. And if you want it, here it is. Come and get it. But you better hurry, because it's going fast.
Well, it's good for you to qualify that time frame, because yes, it's not months, but it's not now. There is a conversation and a back and forth that happens, because you have to understand each other and what's important. And
Yeah.
you don't want to negotiate with somebody who's desperate, because
Unless that desperation benefits your need and purpose.
it depends on the long-term benefit of that, though. Because
Mhm.
if you negotiate with somebody who's desperate and they're and they feel coerced, and you want to do more deals for them, then it creates a bad relationship.
Totally.
So it really, really depends on, how far is their desperation.
Of course.
If it's just, oh, they want it in a faster timeline, that's not desperation. That's just their terms. But if it's if, for example, their whole life savings is $100,000 and you want their $100,000 and you're negotiating for that, it's like,
No.
you don't do that.
You don't. It will be much more of a headache later than it is a benefit
Exactly.
today. But if somebody, so when you say negotiating with someone who's desperate, the thing that comes to my mind, the first thing, there are many things that can come to mind, obviously, if we start thinking about it. But the first thing that comes to mind is somebody makes a bad decision and buys incorrectly. So let's say we're talking about real estate, but you can talk about a company. You can talk about valuation. There's so many different things. But let's say you're buying a piece of real estate, or let's say you're buying an item. This cup, so my Scotch cup. Let's say I bought this for $100. Dimitri, why do you do this? It's not worth $100. But now I'm strapped for cash because I used all my rent money on the Scotch cup, and rent money is $20. The cup is worth around that. I could sell a cup for $20, right? But if I show desperation, someone's going to say, well, I'll give you 15 for it. You can come up with the other 5 some other way, right? And you're going to be like, shit, I'm so desperate that I'm going to sell it. So sometimes from the buyer's perspective, so in that case, I'm the unfortunate schmuck that overpaid. But sometimes, look, people make stupid decisions all the time, and it sucks. And we try to tell people to stop making stupid decisions. But I'll tell you, every single day, I tell someone in some circumstance, do not do that. That is ridiculous. That is not a great decision. And you know what they say? Yeah. Okay, whatever. And then like a couple weeks later, or a couple months later, or sometimes a couple years later, they call me or we talk and they're like, well, I shouldn't have done that one. Oh, well. So someone's going to take advantage. And it's not about taking advantage of people that are in bad circumstances. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about someone's going to take advantage of the fact that you made a bad decision. You're going to have to live up to that bad decision and make it right. If you don't, it's going to get worse. You need to make rent at the end of the month, whatever, mortgage payment. You got to pay that Ferrari off, whatever the hell it is, depending on where you are. So you're going to take a loss. So by you taking a loss, someone takes a benefit, and you're helping each other. There can still be a win-win, but that desperation, when I think of that desperation, I think, I'm not going to pay you 20 for it. I'm going to pay you 15. It's going to hurt more for you, but you'll still be fine. And I'm going to have even more wiggle room because I don't want to be making that bad decision. What if the cup value today it's 20? What if tomorrow it's 15? Well, I just bought it for 20. Damn it. No, well, let me buy it for 15 today. And then if it stays at 20, well, then I have a net benefit already. And then I'm going to add value to the cup. I'm going to fill it with delicious Scotch and sell it for 40, like, you see what I'm saying? This is strategy, but psychology is fundamental to negotiations. We all want something. What do you want? Tell me what you want. I want you.
I tell you what I want. I want when people use best and final to mean best and final.
But who actually does?
It's a pet peeve of mine for somebody to use it and then not mean it. It makes me just want to be like, just good, and just no, we're good. And then like you said, and then no. Oh man, I've used best and final on the sell side, but it really was my best and final. Like I meant it. I'm not budging
Yeah.
on it. I don't care.
But then
what
that's a great opportunity to call them on that bad behavior. It's like, hey, you said this, but it isn't. You know, what is it really?
No, that's a good point.
But in
Yeah,
that circumstance, so shame, which is what you're talking about there, shame can be used to your benefit, but you have to be careful, because if you shame someone, like if you call somebody out for doing something that they know they shouldn't have been doing, but now you're shaming them for it too much in the wrong circumstance,
Yeah,
it could come back and bite you, because they
really
could say,
depends on the delivery, because you know you can be joking about it, especially on how you know how you have to gauge them first. But if you play it off with a joking tone, or a nice tone, you can go, wait. You said it was best and final. Now we're continuing a negotiation. Let's keep on going here then.
yeah, and then maybe
You know?
they'll think twice before using
Yeah, that wasn't the stopping point. Let's just keep on going. But then you know it's friendly instead of shaming.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I'm taking this away from your messaging. Let's keep on going and keep on bringing the price down because your last best and final wasn't the best and final. But of course,
go on.
oh no, I was, yeah, but you're right. If you say it in such a way that actually shames the person, it'll just close them down. And then negotiation, you know, turns emotional.
Yeah, and emotion in a negotiation can be beneficial, but not always. Not that kind of emotion, unless you're Japanese. The Japanese, that's like what they do apparently. It makes me think of, so I recently had a contractor do a bunch of work in my house, not this house, different house. And I need to paint these walls. I just realized the walls. I don't like the walls paint color. All right, whatever. That's a personal problem. We can negotiate on the cost of paints later. No, but I had a contractor do a bunch of work in my house, and you know, the one thing that pisses me off, my pet peeve, and it's not even just a pet peeve. This is like, if you're doing business with me, it's a no-go. It's a no-go. This will make me go from nice Dimitri into not so nice Dimitri, like fast. And it's, you tell me it's going to be this, and then it becomes this. Don't do that to me. Don't do me like that. I'm not going to do you like that. You don't do me like that. I understand that things change, but like, don't try to do me like a bitch, because I don't work that way.
Yeah, and to qualify that, you mean changing things at the last moment.
Changing terms, changing price, trying to negotiate out a deal, and then saying, well, I can't actually do that deal, so let's change it to something that I can do now that I've hooked you and you've already paid me something. That's bullshit, and I don't stand for that.
Or you already have time commitments, or you're already beholden to other people.
Yeah, I'm like, wait, you said you're going to do something this day and for this much, but it's turning to be this other day for way more. What the hell? What's going on here? Like that leads to argument. So I always put it out front, like, you're in, this is it. Are we good? Here, like, I always double check. I think it's so important. And a lot of times people don't double check because they're scared of ruining the deal that they've negotiated. You're not going to ruin the deal. Double check. Always say, this is it. We're not changing it. We're putting it in stone, contract written up, signed, lawyers ready to go. If you screw me over on this, like, I don't like lawyers any more than you do. In fact, I can't stand lawyers. I hate spending time with them. But
if you double check and it ruins the deal, you didn't have the deal to begin with.
Exactly.
Now you've avoided the fallout of thinking you had the deal and making moves based on that thought, which is always a good thing. I'd rather double check and lose it than to not double check and then lose it later, because again,
it's more expensive later.
You don't have the deal. Like, if you double check and it falls apart, you didn't have the deal.
Well, it falling apart later is much more expensive than it falling apart today where it's free.
Way more expensive.
But the point is, so I had this contractor working in my house. He's still doing it. And so we had a bunch of work done. We had a wall removed. We had a bunch of cabinets put in, whatever. Not a big job because it wasn't like a structural wall. But then there needed to be one extra cabinet. And I was like, okay, well, let's talk about it. And then he gives me a price, and I'm like, dude, that's too much. Like, that's lame. Now, I knew that I needed the cabinet because the space needed this. Period. Like, it's just, and it wasn't so much that I was like, no, I can't do it. I can't afford that. Oh my goodness. But it was like, I don't want to pay that. And I also knew that there was like 5 other jobs that my wife was telling me to do. And I'm like, I'm not going to do those jobs because I'm busy doing other stuff. Well, I was going to do those jobs, but I don't want to do those jobs. Like small things like door stoppers and like, whatever, that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, listen, I'll pay this if you do all of those jobs. And he's like, okay. So, yeah, I negotiated out some terms. Did like 5 other jobs, and way better than I would have done it. Because look, I'm great. I may be a great negotiator. I may be good at structuring, but I'm not a handyman. Yeah. Well, I can do it, but I'm not a professional contractor. It's literally what he does for a living, and he's great at it, right? And so he did a much better job. Put up some TVs and stuff. Like, I have done these things in the past. I will do them if I need to. But he ended up doing it. And so everybody won. So a lot of times you can negotiate to add something that you need done, and it makes the price less bitter. At the end of the day, I feel like we both felt like we won.
Absolutely. And that's
those
good.
additional things that you added for him, wouldn't really have cost him much.
No, it took like nothing.
Yeah, it's an unequal value situation like we were talking about earlier around the terms. For you to do it would take 3 hours maybe, and your time is, super valuable. Well, his time's valuable too. Maybe not, he doesn't see his time as valuable as yours, but even if he does, he sees himself taking less time than you would because he can knock it out in an hour.
Because he knows what he's doing. Because he knows what he's doing much better than I do.
Exactly. So for him, he's like, okay, I'll give in this hour of my time. And for you, you're like, I'm willing to pay this much to save 3 hours of my time, Exactly.
And the quality of it is going to be better in his hour than in my 3 hours because he's a specialist.
Yeah.
It'd be the same thing as if he needed to, do a structure or a negotiation for a real estate deal or for a venture capital deal. I mean, I'm going to do a better job because that's what I do. I'm going to do a better job than him, and I'll do it probably faster and better.
You had mentioned something a while ago about Japanese and emotions in negotiating.
Oh, so
what was that?
So I have. We're doing a webinar on my trip to Asia, to the Asian continent. Very ancient culture, beautiful, messed up. In any case, no, we're going to be talking about all kinds of fun stuff in Asia. But some of the folks that I talked to, I did not go to Japan, but I've been learning about their cultures because every Asian not to lump everybody into one group. Every country has a different culture. So I went to Taipei in Taiwan, Manila in the Philippines, Shanghai in mainland China, and then Hong Kong. And every single place had a completely different culture and way of doing things. People are people, but the values and way in which they interact, especially on a business level, was completely different. And so I mentioned Japan because several of the people that we met in Hong Kong and then people here in the United States that I know that have done a lot of business in Japan have expressed how the Japanese do their business. And first of all, the Japanese economic system, or I suppose private business system, is very kind of oligarchical. Is that even a word? Oligarchical? Ollie Oxenfree. There's like 20 families that pretty much run all of Japan, right? and they're extremely wealthy, and that's cool. I mean, for whatever it's worth. But the culture is very shame based, as in, if you fail, if here in America, if you fail, you feel a little bit of shame. You're like, I should have done that better, or I messed up. And then you move on and you live your life and you learn from your mistake. Hopefully you should learn from your mistake, and you go on to do other new things, and you grow because of your mistake. In Japan, apparently it's very, if you make a mistake, you are shunned and shamed by your peers, and everything is very, it has to be a certain way, very Japan focused, very ultra conservative, slow moving way of doing business, which I'd actually be interested in hearing your opinion on it, Brian, because you lived there and worked there. Is that a fair assessment? I've been hearing
there, but I didn't negotiate or do business there. The only business I ever did there was with foreigners, so it kind of insulated me from that part of the culture. I'm not very familiar with it. I do notice that a lot of people seem to internalize their shame on a workplace, and it's not that their peers are shaming them, but it's that they're causing the pain onto themselves from what I've observed with my peers.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a second to comment on something, because I feel like you made a delineation between wealthy business people and business negotiations, and how the typical population works and lives, and the culture thrives. Money doesn't change culture. If you're from Southern California and you are extremely wealthy, and you're from Southern California and you're extremely poor, but you're working in a general environment that is similar, your culture is going to be very similar.
Yeah, you're right.
You may act a little douchier on a personal level, on a social level, but the way in which you interact on a negotiation is going to be similar, right?
Yeah.
Your values are similar.
Exactly. So the shame component is very, like, I've heard this. So obviously, we deal with capital a lot. Big surprise. And I've heard that when you're dealing with Japanese capital, they're very hesitant to invest with foreigners, non-Japanese, because the people that are managing the money. So if you think of it like a hierarchy, and I will be the first one to say that I'm not the foremost expert on this. This is something I've been learning about recently from many different sources, and it's the same story. So it seems anecdotally very accurate so far. So there's the guys that actually have all the money, the extremely wealthy families, the patriarchs of said families, etc. But then there's people that manage that money. They're not managing their own money. And so those people that are managing the money are, of course, Japanese. And then they have analysts and such. There's less incentive for that manager, the money manager, to invest with a non-Japanese, because if he invests with a non-Japanese, an American or a European or whatever, and something happens, something goes wrong, regardless of whose fault it is, something goes wrong, he's on the line. And so he's the one who's shamed per the culture. But if he invests with a Japanese person, even if it's a foreign Japanese person, then that's the person that will accept the shame, because they're the end of the line on the Japanese side. It's weird. So the incentive isn't to make the best decision. The incentive is to cover your own ass as the manager by investing with another Japanese person. Even if it's the worst decision, you can say, well, it was his fault, and he's the one who's going to be shamed, and he's the one who's going to be shunned, and you're going to be fine, even though you lost a lot of money, let's say, socially. So that's what I meant when I was referring to the dynamic of And so when you're talking about a negotiation, by the way, understanding culture is important. Like if I go to Japan as a big, tall white guy and I'm like, hey, I mean, sorry to bring up race in 2019. I know it's a big deal. But if I go to Japan as a big, tall white guy, you know, they may be like, oh, it's really cool to see you because, you know, you're so much taller than everyone else. But when it comes to the buying decision, they're going to take it very slow, and they're going to want, just like the Chinese, are going to want some form of control on their side of, well, we want a Japanese person because I need someone to be the fall guy. The money manager will want the fall guy. So in case Dimitri screws it up, or in case the American economy takes a hit, there needs to be this Japanese person to be the guy so that the uppity ups aren't upset. Yeah. Which the Chinese do as well, right? That's why we hear about them being, you know, whenever you do a JV in China, that you have to do it with a Chinese partner, right?
And the incentivization of the converse is not there, because it's not like if they invest with an American and it goes well, they're a hero now. You know, it can only be okay or bad. You know?
Yeah. It can be as expected or it can go poorly.
Exactly.
So the incentive isn't there to, like, here in America, we're very focused on, let's get the job done. Let's do a good job. But over there, it's different. They already have their incentives are different, but they have incentives.
Yeah.
Brian, you look like you're contemplating something.
No.
It's
Just
funny. I've seen that exact thing you're talking about play out even in relationships, like just boyfriend girlfriend relationships. It's like anytime I've dated, you know, someone of a different culture, it seems that, like, especially with Japanese culture, it seems like if the relationship doesn't go well, their family is like, oh, you chose wrong. We told you. You did this risk. Shame on you. Like, why? But if they have dated like another Japanese person in the past and that guy screws up, the family's like, he was no good. He fooled you. He tricked you. He's bad. Like, oh, shame on him.
Yeah.
It's
You
funny.
shouldn't have trusted that foreigner.
Yeah, it's weird though, because they're stopping the responsibility on her because I'm foreign. But if it's someone of their, it passes right on down the line, just like you were talking about.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
and
it's
I
a
think
push
it also has to do with people's conduct there, because if you've been, if you're Japanese, then you know how people should act and how people should feel. I mean, just living there for 5 years, you kind of get acclimated to how people see each other. It's very subtle.
Oh, big time.
There's always a lot of like uncertainty on what's going on, what's my position in other people's eyes, how are they seeing me, you know, and it's not always vocalized. So especially when things are vocalized, it's so harsh. Even if the vocalization is so, you know, simple, like, you know, don't you think you shouldn't be doing that, is enough to, you know, cause a lot of emotional turmoil. Whereas over here, it's like, oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, my bad.
Oh man.
They definitely have conversations on an eye level as well. Like eye shape and eye movement is big to them. They're having a dialogue just off of eye movement on top of the dialogue that's being spoken, which I was oblivious to, and an unwitting participant in, because they're looking at my eyes too. They're looking at me and reading my input on that level of conversation, and my eyes are just doing whatever they do. I'm putting zero thought into it, so I'm like a filterless conversation with my eyes. But I later found out that that's a very important aspect of the conversation and communication is eye shape.
Where you're looking, and eye shape. Yeah.
Where you're looking, how you're looking, and that's why if you notice on emojis will have a smile but with 4 different eyes. Like, and they'll have a frown but with 3 different eye sets. It's like, okay, that one's laughing. That one's laughing too. That one's also laughing. They're all laughing, but the eye shapes are different. This one's squinting. That one's open.
That one's like, ha, 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 ha.
Yeah, and it's
the other one's like, ho, 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 ho.
And these are totally different things to them. You know, it's like, to me, I'm just like, yeah, one of the laughing ones.
Give me a laughing one.
Exactly, but that's why they exist, because emojis were actually designed by Japanese. So they've put in all of these eye shapes that mean all these different things. But
I'm gonna look at that.
You know, like, we don't necessarily speak that language, so
I think it's I think it's so fascinating. We should definitely do another Scotch Money on perception, because negotiation and perception kind of go hand in hand, but perception's this whole
it's what you pay attention to, not necessarily just how you perceive things. It's like what culturally irks you and why you like look at certain things. Like, for example, when speaking to a Japanese person, when they make their hand gestures, I notice that it's all around the face. So somebody goes, me, like they do this. It's like, oh, me? And I was like, oh, that's a very unique and cute way of doing it.
As opposed to pointing to the chest.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah. And it's like, okay, that's
I think when you're talking about this kind of stuff as it's applicable to a negotiation specifically, being aware of negotiation is about, look, even if you are friends with the other side, as in, let's say the 3 of us, well, 3-person negotiation is going to be tough. Let's say Brian and I are in a negotiation over something. We're friends. There's no need for us to be arguing about anything. But when it comes to business, if it's serious business, right? Like, if we're talking about a serious business conversation, we both understand and respect each other enough to know that, all right, we're going to take this seriously. All jokes aside, ha, ha, ha. Let's take this seriously. Let's firm it up. And once it's firm, we're good. But we also understand that while we're negotiating for mutual benefit, but there needs to be mutual benefit. If there isn't, we're not going to do it. But at the same time, the inherent default of a negotiation is an adversarial position. But that doesn't mean that we're at war. It means that, like, if you're playing a game of chess or if you're playing a card game, it's an inherent adversarial position. Does that mean that I'm going to be like, you and your whole family die, I'm going to beat you in this game? No, it means that you accept that there's an adversarial position and you need to understand what the other side is thinking in order to be able to bridge the gap. Once the gap is bridged and things are signed, now you're friends again.
Yeah. It's not always adversarial in that sense, though, because the goals of each person might be different.
Exactly.
In a chess game, for example, your goal is always to kill the other person's king or to checkmate.
Yeah.
But in a negotiation, if each person has different goals and different priorities, and you understand those priorities, then it becomes a creative exercise. Here's your boundaries and your values, and here's my boundaries and my values. How do we play together?
And that's bridging the gap. That's what I was talking about when I said bridge. If you understand each other, and the better you understand each other, the better you can bridge that gap and come to a solution that works for both sides. Negotiations should end up with friendship. Continue, please.
Oh, I heard like a little bird somewhere from.
That sounded like Hunter.
That was R2 telling me that they have a text.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
All right. He speaks in bleeps, you know.
Mr. D2 was my father.
Mr. D2 was my father.
Yeah, it's funny because they have a couple of different options for ringtones with R2D2. And so I set up different ones for different things. So I have a different squeak beep babble for voicemail versus text versus, you know, other things. So whenever I hear him, he actually makes sense to me, which is awesome. Because in all the movies, you know, he does all this. And Luke's like, I know, I'm getting to it. Would you just chill out? And it's like, I'm having the same conversations. Hey, yeah, thanks for the text, buddy. I just
Got the text.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, it's like I understand him.
Do you guys have any final thoughts on negotiations that you want to share?
No, let's just go for closing thoughts.
Let's go for closing thoughts. Hunter, you start with your closing thoughts. Start us off with closing thoughts. Yeah.
Closing thoughts on negotiations. Bottom line is, at the end of a negotiation, if you're happy with what is proposed to you, make the deal. If you're not happy with it, do not be afraid to walk away. That is the best advice I can give. Go for what you want. Know what you want going into it. Go for what you want. And if you don't get it, walk away.
Yeah, I agree.
And on that side, it's incredibly important to drill down on knowing what it is that you want. Because even though it seems simple talking about it in a negotiation, it's so easy to forget what it is that you're actually negotiating for. You know, have an end goal. Not go, oh, I want the cheapest price possible. You know, actually have an idea of in your mind on what that price is. So do your analysis going forward. Be prepared. Don't go in trying to prepare while you're negotiating or using the negotiation as a brainstorming session to understand what you want, know what you want beforehand, and then everything else in the negotiation will be a creative exercise on figuring out, okay, what are the things we can actually trade? You know, here's where I'm from, here's where you're from. Are there other things outside of this that we can trade, similar to Dimitri's, like, oh, here's the honey-do list. I want you to do my honey-do list, and I'm willing to pay your price for the cabinets, right? It wasn't in the realm, it wasn't in the playing field, but it can be placed in the playing field.
Anything can be negotiated. All right, my final thought is, and I feel like we've covered so many important things that that are just so crucial when you're thinking of a negotiation. My final thought is this: don't look at what someone else is making. So, as a kid, hopefully your parents told you, don't look at what other people are eating, focus on your own plate. Good strategy. All of these things that we just mentioned, that's extremely important. And focus on you. Focus on your side of the negotiation. If you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm going to make a lot of money, but that guy's going to make even more money, who cares? Good. Everyone should make money. If he's losing and you're winning, then you're an asshole. Now, sometimes you got to be an asshole, and life is that way. But if there's an opportunity for a win-win and it works for you and you've committed to it working for you, maybe you squeeze a little bit more out because business is business, but don't look at their plate. Don't focus on how much money they're making. Focus on the money you're making, because it doesn't matter what they're doing. Focus on the core strategy that you set out.
Yeah. Does the deal work for you? It's on them to determine if the deal works for them.
Exactly.
All that matters is, does the deal work for you?
Does the deal work for you? And on that note, I'm going to say, smash smash that like button, subscribe it in, punch that retweet button in the kidneys. Ugh. Smash it up. We've been crying out for much too long, and now we're going to dance to a different song. Smash it up. Like button, subscribe it. Scotch Money, Bosch Capital, Hunter Slay, Brian Arandez, Dmitry Chabatarov in the house. What? Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for coming, joining us all, everybody, on the Scotch Money Show, where we talk about Scotch and money and Scotch and money and so much Scotch and so much money.
Fun as usual.
Cheers.
Guys.
Got that last drop.